from January of '05 from the Chief of Staff to the Attorney General, and it says we would like to replace 15 to 20% of the current U.S. attorneys, the underperforming ones. The vast majority of U.S. attorneys, 80 to 85%, I would guess, are doing a great job, are loyal bushies, etc., etc. Mr. McKay, do you believe that you were replaced because you were not a loyal bushy?
No, I don't think that's right, Tim. First of all, we all try to do our jobs in the best way that we can based on the evidence. I think all United States attorneys try to do that. My office had recently received a very outstanding evaluation for the work that the men and women in Seattle do here on behalf of the United States government. So we're more interested in being loyal to where the evidence goes in criminal cases and not in politics.
Mr. Iglesias, the White House counselor Dan Bartlett was talking about you. Particularly and personally, and this is what he said. White House spokesman Dan Bartlett says Iglesias was fired, for, quote, for lack of leadership. Bartlett said the government was specifically frustrated when the corruption trial of former state treasurer Robert Vigil in New Mexico ended in a conviction on just one of 23 counts. Quote, it was a devastating loss for the government, Bartlett told reporters. And yet, the former number 2 in the Attorney General's office, James Comey, said this, that you were a fired up guy. David Iglesias was one of our finest and someone I had a lot of confidence in as Deputy Attorney General. Why the disparity in views?
Well, getting back to the Vigil trial, that was a historic case for my district. We had never prosecuted a case, a public corruption case of that size. We got 4 indictments, 4 convictions. Mr. Vigil, the former state treasurer, is going to do 3 years in the federal penitentiary. Is that a devastating loss? I don't think so. Mr. Comey has a better idea of what I was doing because he was my direct supervisor. Mr. Bartlett was never my supervisor.
What did you think when you heard Mr. Bartlett's comments?
Well, I thought he's out of touch. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's looking at talking points. He doesn't know the facts underlying what we do as U.S. attorneys, and especially in my case.
The fact that you only got one of 23 counts didn't disturb you?
Well, it was a little bit of a disappointment, but frankly, had he been convicted of 10 out of 23 counts, I doubt he would have done a lot more time.
You wrote an op-ed piece for the New York Times, and I want to share that with our viewers and come back and talk about it. Politics entered my life with 2 phone calls that I received last fall, just before the November election. One came from Republican Representative Heather Wilson and the other from Senator Pete Domenici, both Republicans from my state, New Mexico. Ms. Wilson asked me about sealed indictments pertaining to a politically charged corruption case widely reported in the news media involving local Democrats. Her question instantly put me on guard. Prosecutors may not legally talk about indictments, so I was evasive. Shortly after speaking to Ms. Wilson, I received a call from Senator Domenici at my home. The senator wanted to know whether I was going to file corruption charges, the cases Ms. Wilson had been asking about before November. When I told him that I didn't think so, he said, quote, I'm very sorry to hear that, and the line went dead. He hung up on you?
That's right.
Did you feel intimidated by those phone calls?
Pressured, leaned on, yes, because of the timeline, because of the fact that they were Congresswoman Wilson was in a tight race at that time. I think she was behind. The local press had given significant coverage of this subsequent corruption matter. I couldn't talk about it to anybody, much less members of Congress.
Had a congressman or a senator ever called you about a case prior to that?
No. I'd received letters identifying the constituent, and I responded to those. Those are typically after the fact. People were unhappy with the sentence. But I'd never gotten any contact regarding a pending matter, much less something that had been widely reported like that.
When you receive phone calls like that, do you have an obligation to report to your superiors that you received them?
I do, under the U.S. Attorney Manual, and I've given that up. I should have reported it right away.
Why didn't you?
Well, I felt a tremendous sense of loyalty. I was conflicted. I knew what the requirements were under the U.S. Attorney's Manual. And on the other hand, Senator Domenici had been a mentor to me. Heather Wilson had been a friend and an ally, and I felt deeply conflicted.
Why had you not gone forward with indictments? Was the evidence not there?
Well, I can't even confirm. I'm still bound by the federal rules. I can't even confirm if there was an investigation pending. So I'll just have to let it go at that.
Mr. McKay, there was an article in the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, your hometown paper there in September of '06, and it said this, The federal prosecutor for Western Washington says his office is stressed to the limit because of years of budget cuts that threaten to slow the pace of criminal prosecutions. U.S. Attorney John McKay has issued this warning to county prosecutors and special agents in charge of federal agencies, including the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and Immigration and Customs. Quote, "We may not be as responsible as you want us to be on the cases you refer to us." And then there was an email within the Attorney General's office about a letter you had written about information sharing from local criminal justice organizations. I believe McKay is way out of line here. Internal deliberations and policy recommendations should not be shared outside of the department unless so authorized by the Deputy Attorney General. I don't know what McKay's motives are, but this is embarrassing and outrageous. Do you believe that those two incidents are part of the reasons that you were asked to leave?
Well, Tim, first of all, I was given no reason for my dismissal. Then I was told that there were performance issues, and then I was told it was a disagreement over policy. The Justice Department's reasons for my dismissal keep changing. All of the actions that I took in information sharing, which was right at the heart of the President's national security agenda, were authorized at all times, and no one at the Department of Justice ever told me that I was working against policy or that anyone had any disagreement about what I was doing. And so those are sort of red herrings. All of us are responsible for dealing with our local media with regard to actions we take as the coordinators of federal law enforcement. We're the chief federal law enforcement officials in each of our districts. And so it's important for us in consultation with the Department of Justice to speak to the media about events affecting our district. And at all times I complied with policies. I think what's really happening here is the department has gone back and tried to find a reason to justify their dismissals of us. And of course, we knew we served at the pleasure of the President. That's why I resigned without comment until they decided to go up to the Hill and tell less than the truth.
Wednesday, you gave an interview and quoted